It's Wednesday. You know what that means. It's 5 Minute Rehab Day. Come on in. Come on in. We have a really good topic for today that we want to have a conversation about. But I want to introduce myself. If you don't know who this is, who I am, my name is Taisha Presley. I am the owner of Legacy Empowerment Services. I own a mental health private practice here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work with adolescents and young adults who have experienced some type of dysfunction and they just want to get their lives together. So I help them to rehabilitate their lives. We rehabilitate everything else. Why not rehabilitate your life, right? So that's what I do here in Charlotte. And listen, I had a really good conversation with someone that hopped in my inbox. They asked me if I believe that there is a such thing as a soul tie, So I want to just first of all build a foundation about what a soul tie is. So I'm going to read to you because it comes from the Bible. So I want to read to you the scripture that talks about soul ties. It's 1 Samuel chapter 18, first couple of verses. It says, "Now when he," talking about Jonathan, "had finished speaking with Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him," David, "as his own soul. So Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because Jonathan loved David as his own soul. And Jonathan took off his robe that was on him and gave it to David. He also gave him his armor, even his sword, his bow, and even his belt." So for a Christian, a soul tie is when you become so connected, so bonded, so interconnected with someone that it drives your behaviors either in a positive way or a not so positive way. And they also believe that that connection can be to the detriment of yourself, to the extent that when you try to disconnect that soul tie or that bond, it's difficult to do. And you might have to do extra things like fast or pray or have someone else pray for you in order to break that connection. So the question is, do I believe, clinically speaking, that there's a such thing as a soul tie? And surprisingly, my answer is yes. My answer is yes. Now listen, before I get started, Christians, hey, Christians, I'm not your pastor. I am not your pastor, but I am your therapist. So let's dig in. All right. So if you have ever had a conversation with me, the one thing that I have always talked about, will always talk about, is the brain and how the brain functions. There are lots and lots and lots of different things that the brain does in order to keep us alive and keep us safe. And one of those things is that we have a reward system that drives our behaviors. And so what happens with our reward system is that there are different chemicals released that drive our behaviors, either for good or for bad. And what happens when those chemicals are released, it conditions our brain to need to do the thing that we engage in order to continue to receive the high from the chemicals. And so the chemicals are like feel-good chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. Those chemicals feel so good to our brain. And so if we do something that activates those chemicals, we want to do it more. It's for our brain to get the same experience. And so it could be that we have a relationship with someone and we are doing things that release those chemicals in our brain, like maybe kissing or touching or hugging or spending time with that person or smelling that person or seeing certain things that they do. And those things become cemented in our mind and conditions our brain to need those things because it makes us feel so good. And so what happens is that we're not actually craving that person, so to speak. We're craving that high, that chemical high that engaging with that person creates. And so, yes, so then our soul, our mind, our will, our emotions become attached to that experience because our brain is conditioned to need what that person gives us in the form of chemicals. And so that is why I say that yes, there is a clinical way to explain soul ties, and that's my thoughts. I want to know from you, do you believe that there's a such thing as soul ties? Drop that in the comments below. And as always, I will see you next week.